We're going to explore anaglyph artwork in this video. And an anaglyph is where you have two images on the same piece of paper and you need something optically to separate the images so your right eye sees one image and the left eye sees the other. Now, anaglyphs are not new. This idea has been around for a long time. Back in the 1800s, they would do these stereoscopic images, and the idea is the camera would take one picture which would represent your right eye and another picture which would represent the left eye. And then these images were put inside a stereoscope, and you would look through and the image would look 3D because your left and right eyes would combine the images in your brain and it would look three-dimensional. It was really kind of cool. You can actually take some of those images and reverse them, meaning putting what's right onto the left, and you can see a 3D image by crossing your eyes. And then this would look like it's a three-dimensional ghost at a table with this gentleman who looks very surprised. This picture is from 1856 and comes from the Metropolitan Museum in New York City. So this idea of stereographs and making 3D images is very old. A modern version of that is the Viewmaster, where kids from the 1950s would put in these discs and you could see images, photographs that would be 3D. And again, one image is slightly different from the other, and it's just your point of perspective that would make it look different, and then your brain merges the two images. We're even doing this now in 3D viewers, where you can pop your phone in and look at images in 3D and play video games. Another version of this that was very popular in the 1990s were these pictures where you would have these unusual patterns across the surface, but if you would stare at it, you would start to see a three-dimensional image, and it would kind of emerge from the patterns. So believe it or not, there is an elephant in a jungle in this image. So if you pause this video, maybe you can stare and see it, but you actually have to focus your eyes beyond the piece of paper and it'll work. So how do we make anaglyphs? Well, we need to have some kind of 3D glasses, one lens red and the other one cyan or blue. If you don't have these lenses, you can actually make it by getting a little piece of plastic and using a red marker and a blue marker to color the plastic. Or you can make glasses that way, or you can buy these very cheaply on Amazon. I will have a link below to where I got them. I got 100 of them relatively inexpensively. So what we're looking at and paying attention to is that the blue side can still be seen through the red, but on the blue side it won't be seen. So it's filtering out half of the image. Same thing on the red side. We can see the word red through the blue lens, but on the red lens we can't. So it's acting like a filter. So we use this property to create our images. There are some images that are copyright free on the internet, and here is one. And I actually made a bit.ly for this, so it's bit.ly /CTANAGLYPH, and you can download that image and use it in your classroom. It's by Mr. Kruger, and he uploaded it to Wikimedia. What we can see in this is that the blue is off to the left on the feet, and that will make the feet pop up in the image. And over here, the blue is to the right, and that will actually make the image appear to be below the picture plane, below the surface. And then here, the blue and the red match up, so that's going to be the same level as the paper. So when we look at this, it's going to be on an angle that goes downward and away from us, which is really kind of cool. Artists can use this effect to create three-dimensional images. This one is by Tripuk, and you can see that it's very abstract, but you actually need these three-dimensional glasses, these filters, to be able to see the image pop in 3 dimensions. This is also used by professional artists and illustrators. This one is by Alan Lee and John Howe, as they were doing artwork for The Hobbit and their concept art. And there's a video that you can see about how they made this at bit.ly backslash Hobbits 3D. And then if you add Hobbits 3D-A, you'll be able to see this image on the internet as well. But it's kind of cool to see how they work together to create this 3D image that is a scene from The Hobbit. You can also do this with photography and digital art. This is a photograph by Stefano Sinise. And the idea is that the camera takes essentially two pictures at the same time. And they're, however far apart your eyes are, that's how far apart the images are. So the right-hand image is maybe 2.5 inches away from the left-hand image. And all of one image is in blue and the other image is in red. And then when you use the 3D glasses, you can see that the image looks like it is going in 3D and has depth. So here's an image by my students. I had my students create an image that was tied to their program area. In my school, students sign up for a kind of a major in high school. So this is a nursing student. And by playing around with how far away the lines are from each other, we're able to create an anaglyph image. When the blue is to the right, it goes behind the picture plane. When the blue is to the left, it goes above the picture plane. So it will look like the skull is above the IV bag. And then this is actually tipped in space, so the stethoscope appears to be going in 3D off in this direction. And the little hearts in the eyes are matching each other, so they're on the picture plane. And it looks like when you use the glasses, that it has 3 layers of depth plus an angled piece of depth. So that's really challenging to do. So how do we start? The first thing students need to do is just experiment a little bit. You can do it with graph paper, which is an easy way to do it, and making sure that whatever you draw with blue on the left, you draw with red on the right, or you can reverse it. And we want to make sure that our changes are always horizontal. It won't work if you have changes going up and down. They have to go side to side. This one is my first attempt as we were trying to figure it out. And this image works really well, and this line appears to be going in 3D in that direction. This line as well. The spheres here appear to go up and down from the surface, but these lines didn't really work very well, and we found that the blue that we were using was probably not a good choice. So one way to check that is you can, like I can write here, blue, and then you can put the lens over it and see, can you see through it? If you can see the letters, then it's probably not going to be as good. So try and change out your blues for lots of different ones and see what seems to filter out the best. So here was our second attempt, and with a better understanding of the first one, we start to play around with the idea of the red being on the left or on the right and how that affects the image. The lines, we have the red on the right, and now the red is on the red's on the right, the red's on the left, and we're kind of playing with the angles, playing with the thickness. So we spend a lot of time just kind of playing with the images, putting on the glasses, and sometimes you need to flip them around to see which way works best. And that's nice for these kinds of things. So you do need to experiment a little bit. And once we had the idea of how you could start to manipulate it, we thought, well, what's something that's challenging to draw? And for me as the teacher, I thought a cube would be really hard to make in 3D. So I played around with some wireframes, and this one I could get the center to pop up. This one I could get the corners to kind of play. And once I figured out what was going right and what was going wrong there, I was able to make a 3D cube that's pretty good. It's not perfect, but it took a lot of experimentation. So the assignment that I gave for my students is that they had to do an illustration that was related to their program area. So you saw a nursing one previously, and my program area is I teach art, so I did this. And the nice thing is you can use stencils if you want to. For some of this stuff, it's nice and easy to kind of trace those in. But how do we start? How do we create an actual anaglyph? So I tell my students, first they need an image with thin black lines on paper. And then we get tracing paper, or you can use a light box, whichever one is available, or you can actually put it against a window so that you can see through. And the first thing you do is you trace everything with your red pencil or pen, and just everything straight up. You're not worrying about playing with the depth of anything. And then you can trace it again and move the paper left to right. And you'll notice that I lined up the bottom edges of my paper so that I know when I move it right or left that I'm not accidentally shimmying it, up or down or on an angle, because it won't work anymore. It always has to be left to right. So if I want the image to pop above, I move it a little bit in this direction, and then I would trace it. And if I want it to pop above even more, I would move it over more and then go ahead and trace those parts. With this one, I have the brush. I want the brush to be on an angle. You can actually angle this a little bit, experiment with it, and see if you trace it, if it does indeed go for an angle on you. And then for the lettering, because this paintbrush is going to be up on an angle, I wanted to play with the idea of the letters going across, under, and then back up underneath the brush. So that was my concept to do. So when I'm doing this, I would go ahead and move it over and trace my lines. Now here's one that I did where everything has been traced and moved over exactly the same. So this is a very simple anaglyph, and you can see here I traced the red first and then I traced the blue. And when I look at this through my 3D glasses, it looks as if the whole thing has been lifted up, a quarter of an inch off of the page. There's no play in depth because it's all the same thing, just lifted up. But if I want to show depth, then when I trace it, I need to be playing around with the distance. So let's say I want to have the paint blobs look like they're a little bit above the palette. So I would move this over a bit, and I would go ahead and trace these. And you want to trace as exact as you can, because if you're off even a little bit, your brain won't be able to match up the images. But if it's off, if you follow your lines and you're consistent, the 3D effect will work really well. And let's say I want that blob to be even taller. I would go ahead and move that over a little bit more, and then I would go ahead and trace that on there. So by playing with the paper, let's say I want that drip to go below the palette. So instead of going in this direction to make it pop up, I actually go in the other way, and then I would go ahead and trace this drop. And if I want to make that look even further away, then I would go ahead and spread that distance a little bit more. And then this drop will look like it's below there, and this one will look even below that. The same thing with the lettering. If I want it to go under the brush, then I would move this over and trace my L. And then the parts where I want it to be above, like let's say I want the A to be up, I would go the other direction and then go ahead and trace my A, and then it will appear as if it's higher. So you need to experiment first before you go on to your final artwork. And I'll show you my final artwork here. So by using the glasses and looking at this, and again, you may need to flip them over, see which direction works best for you. This separation is large, so it appears to be way above the paper, and then it slowly goes down under the brush and then back up. This brush, because it's been angled, appears to be on an angle like this. The paint is above the palette, and even the palette is up a little bit, and the paint is even higher than that, and then the paint drops appear to go underneath the palette. Now it's up to you how detailed you want to get with this. You can actually color things in. The blue shapes I color in with blue, and I even was able to shade them, make them look dark on one side and lighter on the other. So it does have a three-dimensional effect that way as well. I played with the intensity of the color of my paint drops. So this one has intense blue, medium blue, light blue. And then I reversed it for the red, intense red, medium red, and then light red. So when you look at this in 3D, the color of each of these paint blobs actually changes a little bit. So you can get a lot of nuance in your drawings this way. I would suggest you pick a theme and try out an illustration, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. and you get some really interesting effects. So there's going to be some links in the description below, and you can get more resources that you can download to use this lesson with your students. I hope you subscribe, and this has been helpful. Thank you.